And as you watch the beginning of the movie, he's on a train. And he's been going through difficult times with his wife and kids. And the difficult times that he's been going through have led him even to second guess if he was going to be faithful to his wife. And so at this time in the movie, Bruce Willis is twirling his wedding ring. Thank you. He's twirling his wedding ring as the stewardess on the train is talking to him. And she's kind of flirting with him, and he's kind of like going to hide his wedding ring because he doesn't want her to see that he's married, because he really doesn't feel a connection to his wife anymore. And in that moment, what happens is the train crashes. And, excuse me. The train crashes, and everyone dies on the train except for Bruce Willis. Everyone dies on the train except for him. And he wonders, what just happened? And as he's coming out of the hospital, everyone's amazed because he has nothing wrong with his body. But yet he's sad. He's discouraged. And the reason is because he has this superpower that he can actually sense and feel what's going to happen when he walks by someone. So in the movie, they show him and he walks by someone and he senses that they're a burglar, that they're someone who robs houses. And the person that is going to rob the house, he knows they're going to do it. He just has this power about him. But he doesn't want to do anything about it. He doesn't want to help the people who are going to be hurt. And so he's miserable. He's not living out what he should be doing. He's not trying to fulfill the purpose, the superpower that he has in him is for. He's not using it for good. And so that's kind of like us sometimes. Sometimes we are not living out and completing what God began in us. Maybe you're here and you're thinking, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it through my life in the path that God has called me to. I'm not sure if what I'm doing is going to last. Is my life going to make it to the end? Is God going to be pleased with me when I approach him after I die? Or maybe you're here and you're thinking, you know what? When times get tough for me, I lose my temper. When times get tough, I lose it. I get upset and I get angry. Thank you. That's good. Yeah. And I get angry and I don't show that I'm like one of God's followers. Or maybe you're here and when you're around people who do not follow God, you don't really look like you follow God. Is that true sometimes with us? Sometimes when we're around people and they're doing things that God does not want them to do, we do the same things or we just keep quiet. We don't say anything. We don't introduce them to the truth they could maybe hear, or we're afraid, or maybe we participate in the things that they're doing. All those things challenge us. They challenge us, all those things. Or maybe you're someone new in the faith and you're wondering, what do I do now? I've started my relationship with God, but what do I do now? And all these questions were part of the church in Philippi, from which we get the word Philippians from, which is the book that we're reading out of. Philippi was a town in the province of Rome, approximately 1900 years ago. It was a town that was primarily Gentile or Greek. And in that town, there were people who liked to worship God, but they weren't sure what the new move of this Jesus person was. And so this church was started up by women. And there was a woman named Lydia, and she was walking down by the river, and she was going across, and she was going to pray by the river with a few other women. And as she was praying, a guy named Paul came around and was able to talk to her about the Savior who had come, Jesus Christ. And he explained how Jesus Christ had come to fulfill the law and the prophets of the Old Testament. And Lydia's heart was opened by God to receive the message which was brought to her. And she became the first member of the church in Philippi. And this church ended up starting out of her home. And she was kind of a wealthy person. And so she had a home, and so she allowed people to stay there and to teach there, and they would sing just like we're doing today, singing songs to God from our hearts. And so that was the first church in ancient Europe. Thank you, God. And so, but in the context, the church had begun and it started to grow, but there was persecution that came. There were people who did not like what was happening in this church, and there were people that did not like the message that was going forth about Jesus Christ. And so Paul, who was a preacher of this message, he was kicked out of there. In fact, he was treated harshly, and he had to leave that town. But he was concerned because the people that he just introduced to Jesus, he was worried about their spiritual and physical well-being. He was concerned that they might be being treated harshly as well. And so he writes them this letter to tell them what they should do. He wants to encourage them. And the fact of the matter is, he writes this letter because he really loves them. He really cares about them. He's deeply moved and angry that he had to be away from them. And so he wants to say, guys, I love you, and I know it's difficult right now, but I'm going to be coming to you soon, and I know God is with you, and he's watching over you. And they had actually sent him a couple times monetary gifts of money. They gave Paul money to further his ministry, to help him in his needs. And so this church, started by women, was one of the strong churches. Amen. And the question that this passage asks and answers is, how do we live out the salvation God began in us? How do you live out the salvation that God started in you when you put your faith in him till when you die or when he comes back? How do you live in that in-between time? What should you do? How should you operate at home? How should you operate in your community? And so let's look at that here in verse 12. Next slide, please. The first way, and there are 5 ways that I've kind of put together from this passage. The first way is work toward the goal as God plays his role. Work toward the goal of accomplishing the salvation God began in you, as God is the one working in you to do things that please him. Amen. Look at verse 12 and 13. So then, my beloved, just as you have also always obeyed me, not as in my presence only, not when I'm around you, but also when I'm not around. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. So he's saying, so then. So sometimes, remember when you guys talk with each other and you're like, so let's just go home. Let's not go out anymore. Let's just go home. Or so, you know what, that's okay. I'm going to do something else. So is based upon some things that were already said. And so he's saying, so then, just as you have also obeyed. So he's saying, just as you have also obeyed the followings and the teachings that I have given to you, keep doing it because I'm not around. I'm in jail right now, and Paul was in jail. Amen. But he's also saying, in light of the fact that Jesus took on the form of a servant, keep obeying. In the form of humility. Jesus was equal with God, but when he came down and took on a human flesh, he became lower than what he was. And I don't know if you noticed, but most of us are down here on this level today. We're not up there. And one of the reasons I did that was because I wanted us to see that we're stepping down because really we're not worth much. Amen. In comparison to God. And so Jesus stepped down and he took on human flesh and he became a servant. He didn't have to do that. But Jesus was also obedient until the point of death. Imagine having the people you created kill you, and you allowed them to do it for a better purpose. So he's saying, Keep obeying what we've taught you. And do it in this way. He says, do it with fear and trembling. Fear and trembling. Why should we be afraid? We're afraid of a lot of things, aren't we? Is anybody afraid of spiders? Some spider? Anybody afraid of little bugs, ants? What are you afraid of? What about just crossing the street? Do you get afraid? Somebody does? Okay. Some roller coasters? Some people are afraid of a lot of things. Some people are afraid of tomatoes, or they're afraid of soup. You could look online and there's a list of I'm afraid of carpet. And so they never go on carpet. So there's all kinds of things. But the real thing to be afraid of is to be afraid in a healthy way of God. God wants us to have fear and trembling. We want to be a little bit afraid when we're thinking about God and in His presence. Because we know He's working. That's why. Because we know He's at work. It tells us, work out your salvation. Live it out. Because God is the one working in you. You're not alone. That's what it's saying. You're not alone. Like when a child, when an infant needs some of his formula, you might help the child take the drink or take the applesauce or whatever it is. You're guiding their hand. You're holding it up to their mouth. God is at work behind the scenes. We don't see it often. He's working in us. He has a connection to our minds. He has a connection to our hearts. And He's able to challenge and motivate us and move us and lead us in the direction we need to go. And He does it for His good pleasure. And so we're working, but God's really working behind the scenes. Now we could say we were farmers. Anybody a farmer here? Or farmed before? Okay, we have one. You don't just go out into the farm and just, God, give us some rain, please rain down on this land, and then there'll be crops there, and there'll be corn. No, you have to work the ground, right? You have to get the shovel out, and nowadays you get the tractor, but you got to do some work on the ground level, and you do pray for the rain to come, and God will give you the rain. It'll cause it to grow, but you got to do some work. And that's like this chapter here, this section. We don't receive credit for what God did in us. And that I read that somewhere. We don't receive credit. God is the one at work. Even if we do great things for God, can we really say we did it? No, we can't. We thank God for doing it through us. Thank you, God, for the opportunity. Thank you for what you did through me. Thank you for giving me the courage. And we often pray for people's hearts to be changed. Why do we do that if He isn't able to change their hearts? He is able to change their hearts. Let's look at the second one. Verses 14 and 15. We need to shine as saints with very few complaints. Shine as saints with very few complaints. What is a saint? Now, I'm going to tell you that I don't take the idea that saints are only people who have done miracles and great things in the past. According to this letter, Paul says to all the saints in Christ Jesus who are in Philippi, he says that the people who have put their faith in God through Jesus Christ are holy people. They're the saints. A saint means holy one. Amen. So he's saying anybody who's put their faith, God considers them a saint. So we need to shine as saints. We need to shine. Shine for the people out there. Let's look at verse 14 and 15. Do everything without grumbling or disputing. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. What a passage. And trust me, it probably challenges all of us. We are all people who complain. We complain when we don't get our way. We complain when when things don't happen that we want to happen. We complain sometimes when things are really good and something small goes wrong. Guilty. I'm guilty. You know what? This reference specifically relates to the community of Christians, of faith. If you're in a community with other people who are believers, God wants you to not complain towards each other or complain against each other. Because the idea that was going on here was that Paul was writing to them, and he knew that they were under pressure. He knew that they were being challenged for their faith by people who didn't follow. And he was saying, don't let that pressure challenge you to complain against each other, to take it out on each other. But you need to recognize that God is in control of everything, and that God is controlling even the people who are persecuting you, who are speaking evil of you. And when you don't complain, and when you don't grumble, like, oh, I wish they just, you know, when you're grumbling and no one can hear you, God hears it. He says, when you don't complain and when you don't grumble, you become blameless children of God. Blameless and faultless. Blameless and pure. Children of God. Children that God brought forth. God's kids. Don't complain too much. If they complain to God. They say, God, we have problems. I have a problem. This is going wrong in my life. This happened to me, and it shouldn't have happened to me, God. He listens to us. He takes it upon himself. He wants to carry that burden. He doesn't want you to carry that burden. He doesn't want you to blast it off at anyone else. And the cool thing is, it's in the middle of a crooked and perverse generation. Amen. If that doesn't characterize some of our world today, I don't know what does. It means that there are people the most of the people in our world have gone the wrong way. That's right. They used to go the right way, and they've gone the wrong way. That's worse. Now, if I can have you three come up forward here. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to pretend that what you're doing is trying to find your way, okay? Just walk slowly and try to find your way. Don't open your eyes. Now try to go back towards the door that goes down to the church, bottom stairs. Go this way. Go this way. Go this way. Let me help you. God wants you to go this way. Let me open your eyes a little. Follow the light. Go this way. God loves you, cares about you. Open your eyes a little. Can you see? Can you see the path? Thank you. The point is that now if we had everyone do that, it would be more clear. 50 people don't know where they're going, and there's one person with a light, and they're showing them the way. That's what this is saying. And multiply that by thousands. I mean, seriously, millions of people just going the wrong way. And they think they're going the right way. That's how this verse is giving us insight. The third thing, here's the thing. The flashlight is not just the truth from God. It's also the way you live it out. Amen. Your light also shines when you do the right thing. How do I do that? How do I shine my light? Next time you're in a situation where you feel like someone is pressuring you to do the wrong thing, don't do the wrong thing. Pray and ask God to help you to either do the right thing, or if it's a situation where you need to leave, God, help me, I need to leave. Or you're getting frustrated and you're starting to be angry, and you don't want to be angry. I do this. This happens all the time. Everyone gets angry. It's what we do with it. God, help me, forgive me, Help me to be at peace. Start your day with prayer. Start your day. When you're going to go to work, and I know some of you guys work with people who are no good. They're no good at treating you right. I'll say that. Before you walk in the door, God, please help me today to be controlled by you, to have self-control so I don't lash out. Or maybe you're in charge of people. Maybe you're a manager. Treat your people well. You need to say what you need to say. But sometimes we take out our frustrations because people don't listen to us. The third thing, the way that we complete our salvation is that we keep holding forth the word of life. Keep holding forth the word of life. Look at this verse. As you firmly hold to the word of life, then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain. That passage is awesome. It's filled with truth. In fact, Paul often in this letter talks about the day of Christ. What is the day of Christ? Verse 6 of chapter 1 says, I am confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. He also says in verses 9 and 10 of chapter 1, and this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in real knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve the things that are excellent, in order to be sincere and blameless until the day of Christ. And then in 28 he says, in no way alarmed by your opponents, which is a sign of destruction for them, but of salvation to you, and that from God. He's talking about the day of Christ. What is the day of Christ? The day of Christ is an extension of the day of the Lord from the Old Testament. It is the idea that God is going to return here through Jesus Christ, the person of Jesus Christ. He's going to step upon this earth again, and he's going to rule over this world. And he's going to restore the things that were wrong. He's going to make things right, and he's not going to rule with injustice. He's not going to treat people wrongly. He's not going to take bribes. He's not going to be lobbied by lobbyists, or he's not going to break the Constitution or whatever is the rule. He's going to rule the right way. And of course, none of us could ever do that because we're fallen by nature. But the day of Christ is also a time when Paul is looking forward to being able to present the people in this church to God. And that's an important responsibility we need to see. Spiritual leaders are in some way responsible for their sheep, for their people, to God. He's saying, if you guys give up now, and remember, he called them beloved. He really loved them. He really cared about them. He was probably in tears saying, please, please keep going in the path you've learned. Even though people are throwing you into prison, even though they're treating you wrongly, talking bad about you, keep going the path. Because then when Christ comes back, it's going to be all okay. And I'm going to be able to present you. I'm going to be able to take you on the stage and show God that you continued till the end, that you made it. Amen. But the way we do that is we hold tightly to the word of life, the word which gives life. The only way we can get spiritual life is by having the word come in and just change the way we think. One guy said it this way. He said, when the Holy Spirit gives us insight into the Word of God, it's like a lightning bolt just jammed right into our head and changed everything we think. Opening the blinders so we can see. Turning the light on when we're walking around in the dark. That's how powerful the Word is. The Word of God. We have to hold tight to it. I remember I was watching The Man of Steel. If you've seen that, the movie about Superman, the newer one. When he's a kid, his dad knows that he's Superman. And he doesn't want him to use his superpower to do wrong. He doesn't want him to fight the kids at school when he's young and they mistreat him. He doesn't want him to fight back. And there's one time where these kids throw him on the ground and they're trying to tell him, hey, show us your powers. Show us what you can do. And he doesn't want to do it, and he's really angry, and he's holding on to a post in the ground of the fence. And he's holding so tightly that he just crushes it because he is Superman. But he doesn't lash out back at them, and he doesn't punch them or get into a fight, and the kids eventually leave. And his dad comes and says, son, one day you'll be able to do for good the abilities you have. Amen. But then they show him get up, and they show the post that he was holding on to was crushed. Metal. That's how we need to hold tightly to the Word of God. Like we want to crush it, no one can take it from us. Hallelujah. Do not take this from me. Let's look at the next point. Number 4, turn your pain into joyful gain. Man, there's a lot of pain in this world. There's ibuprofen for pain, right? Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, what else? Excedrin, ibuprofen, pain patch. You put a patch on you. What else do we do? Aspirin. Man, there's like electric magnets we put on ourselves. Lights. Man, pain. Pain can be fuel for good. Now listen to this. Even if I'm being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service of your faith, I rejoice. And I want you to rejoice with me. What does that mean? Pour out like a drink offering? It means sometimes there was a ritual that people who didn't believe in the true God, they would pour out some kind of like liquid before their God and pour it all the way out. And if Paul is thinking of the Old Testament, they had different ceremonies where they would pour a big jar of wine upon the meat offered to God as a sacrifice. And they poured it all the way out until the last drop. That's the metaphor I'm using there. And so Paul is saying, even in my pain, even though I'm in prison, I want to rejoice because you guys are still going forward. He's going to take his pain and he's going to use it for gain. And that's one of the things we need to remember. We need to remember how much there is with the thing called joy. How powerful joy is. Joy is not just, I'm happy because, I got a raise. But joy is also when you are discouraged and you need to encourage yourself and you look back to what God has promised you. And you let your mind choose to rejoice. And I want to tell you, God can turn the pain that we have into joyful gain, can turn it into joy. Joy is the medicine we need during difficult times. Joy is the aspirin. Joy is the ibuprofen we need when we're going through hardship. Amen. When I was a young man, I grew up in a home that went to a church like this. Not like New Life, but the other church here, Reformed. And, I was taught about God, and I read the Bible. And I went to Sunday school every week of my life. But when I got into high school, I had some friends that led me down the wrong path. And it's not just them leading me. I made the wrong choice. I chose to go down the wrong path. And my parents were concerned about me. In fact, for a while, they didn't know I went down the wrong path. I was into drugs. I would be drinking on the weekends. I smoked pot. I did those things. I lied. I stole. And I lied to my parents about it because I knew if I got caught, I'd be in trouble. But then one day, I was in my room, and all of a sudden, I just felt really bad for the way I lived my life. I remembered it had been years since I prayed to God. Years. When I was a kid, I used to pray. Where am I now? And it was in that moment where I felt like God wasn't looking at the things that I did against him. He just was glad that I came back to him. So he turned me from being a druggie and being a liar to being someone who just wants people to know him, who wants to live right. So God is able, thank you. God is able to turn pain into something totally different. And the key ingredient to that is joy. Remembering God is in it. God is in your pain. The last thing we see is that we need to commend those upon whom we depend. Commend those upon whom you depend. That means there are people that you know spiritually that are good people. They're following God. They've proven that they have good character, that God has been working in them. And he's saying those are the people you need to pass on to someone else, or recommend them for an advance in their ministry, or help them get a little bit higher with what they're doing for God. And Paul does this in these 11 verses here. He says, I hoped in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you shortly. Timothy was a young man of God. And Paul says there was no one like Timothy who has the same heart and passion that I have for telling other people the good news. Amen. And he said, when Paul learned that the Philippians were going through difficulties, his heart was broken, and he had to check in on them. He had to check in and see how they were doing, because he knew his heart was torn if they were going through difficulties, if they were complaining, and if they were grumbling, and if they were starting to fight against each other. And so he wants to send Timothy, someone like him, a young version of himself, to these people to help them get past this difficult time. But he can't send Timothy right away until he knows if he's going to get out of prison. And so instead of sending Timothy, who sought after the interests of Christ and who helped further the gospel, he had to send Epaphroditus. And Epaphroditus was also a fellow worker, a fellow soldier, and a messenger. And Epaphroditus was someone who had actually already visited the people there. And when he was on his way back, he got sick. And they didn't probably know that he was really sick, but by the time he came back to Paul, he was almost going to die. And he risked his life just to get a letter probably to them from Paul. And so Epaphroditus cared about the Philippians, and he's saying, I'm going to send you him again. And he's willing to go again, even though he almost died the first time. But he says God didn't let him die. Even though he was sick to the point of death, God had mercy upon him. And not only him, but also on Paul, on me, Paul says, so that I would not have sorrow. If Epaphroditus would have died, then Paul would have had like one other person, Timothy, with him. And that would have been hard. His joy would have been seriously challenged. So he was eager to send Epaphroditus. And he says, so that when you see him again, you may rejoice, and I may be less concerned. I may be less worried about you. Because, once again, he says, Epaphroditus came close to death for the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was deficient in your service to me. Has anyone here ever been close to death? Okay, there's a few people. That's real. That is something real. There is a man that leads one of the churches of New Life called Kevin Bursama, and we've been talking about him the last few weeks. He almost died. He has 5 kids, young kids, teenagers. He was riding a moped just a few miles north in the city, and a guy blew a stop sign and smashed right into him and threw him like 40 feet. He's about 6'4", and he almost died. They had him for weeks in somewhat like a coma, and he had swelling on his brain, and he had injured his vertebrae, and his legs were swollen. I went to go see him, and a lot of the pastors were there to see him, and people prayed for him. And just like a few days ago, they said they brought him out of the coma, and he was watching the World Cup. God had mercy on him. He's starting to go back to a rehabilitation center so he can get back to his normal self, to watch over his kids, to be a husband, to be a father, to be a pastor. He risked his life for his people. Now, he was just going somewhere on his moped. But still, he's probably doing something for the church. And he was almost killed. So we want to commend people like that. There's a man here, and he's not in this room. He's downstairs. His name is Chris Ortel. He started the service out here. And he's someone that I would commend because he's someone that I've been able to depend upon. He's a man who prays. You don't have to tell him to pray. He prays. He prayed for me right there before I came up here, and I didn't ask him to. Last Thursday, we were talking, and we were talking about what we're gonna do next week for our group, and I was telling him that I was gonna have him do some of the things today, and he said, "Whatever you need, bro, just let me know." Whatever you need, bro. Like, you call the shots, I'll do it. He's really dependable, and he's quiet, but he can preach, and he has a good understanding of God's word. He's someone I would commend. Now, I want to close with this. This is an important scripture, and it challenges us. Because God starts salvation, right? Oh, excuse me, hold on. Okay, wait, here, stay here. Okay, I was just told, these letters are urgent, and are they for everyone? They're for everyone. Yeah. Okay. I guess we'll pass some of these out. Here. Sorry, this is a little different here. See what this is here. When you get it, I guess we can open it, huh? See what it is. Can I have one? Is there one for me? Maybe Gigi and the guy over there. Is there one for everyone? I hope. Oh, yours. I think there's one here for you guys. I know there's two names. That's Mrs. Funches. Nadine. Let me see some of these. That's Randy. Some people don't have one. I think. What's that? Bunches. Okay. Anybody who didn't get one. Anybody who didn't get one. Anybody who didn't get one. Did everyone get one? If you didn't, please raise your hand. There's a couple on the right. can open it. I guess I'll read it. To my child. That's each one of you. I'm so glad to write to you. I miss you so much, and I love the times when we talk. I can't wait until they happen. I'm always leaning my ear to hear you when you speak. I want to make sure I get every word. Can I tell you why you mean so much to me? Can I share with you about how much care and detail I put into creating you? You see, before you were born, I had you in my mind. I had you in my grand scheme of history, and you had a specific part to play. You know that, right? I made you out of the very earth you walk upon. Even though you are made from the earth, you are the highest creature on all this creation. I breathed your life directly into you, and I made you like me, representing me on earth to all creation. Wherever you see a person, think of a living signpost pointing upward to me. Now I know you have been really trying to hang on when things get difficult. I know you try to remain strong when it gets really hard for you, but I want you to talk to me more during those times so you can feel me carrying you. You know I am carrying you, don't you? I don't want you to be afraid in those moments, but I want you to believe in me, who I am, and what I've done. Remember, when the first people I made went against what I asked them, I didn't disown them. I didn't send them out helpless, but I provided for them. In their failure, they realized their nakedness and shame, and it was I who clothed them with new clothing. It was during that first failure that I promised that someone would come forth from the woman's offspring who would crush the enemy. Or recall how when after that point, the whole world, except for 8 dear souls, turned to violence and murder, and I kept the human race safe through Noah and his family on the ark in order to start anew. I had you in mind even then. My heart is for the people I made, the people I fashioned to be close to me, to be restored to me. I wanted that so much that my son's life would not be spared to make it happen. You see, I could not ignore the broken laws and crimes people committed against me and just forgive people without satisfying the justice and righteousness that I may require. For if I did less than demand justice, I would not be a holy God. But that barrier and disruption that was between us was perfected through my son, Jesus. He came to earth with human nature and my nature. He lived perfect and sinless life so that when he died and was punished on an execution instrument, a Roman cross, his death satisfied any claim of justice, any claim of punishment, any anger I could have against the crimes people did against me, and made a path of peace between my created beings and myself a reality. I want to be connected to the people I made so much that I even sought out the forgiveness of the people who did such a cruel thing to my son. It's hard for me when people think I don't love them because I publicly displayed my love for the world when I put my son on that cross. It hurt me to turn away from Jesus when he cried out to me, when he was in his time of need, when he was in a place where people were mocking him and spitting on him. But I knew that substituting him in that moment, in the place of people who could not provide any substitute for their guilt, meant that I myself and the people I made, precious people like you, could again embrace each other. I had to look away when Jesus cried. But I did not leave Jesus to decay and be forgotten in the grave. No, I brought him back to life in 3 days. In fact, that was part of my plan too, to show death and the devil my victory and to conquer my earth and creation. Because Jesus was willing to lower himself to take on a human body and to suffer such a horrible death, I exalted him above everyone and everything. One day he will bring rule to the earth that is characterized by peace and harmony. The rest of this letter is my message for people. They really need to hear it. I desire them to obtain peace and forgiveness with me through the holy sacrifice of my Son. When people trust in my Son, a whole new relationship exists. You know about this because you have heard it before. You know that my Spirit lives in you at the point you trust in me, that my angels then care for you and serve you as you need protection, or when you have requests of me. Think of the times that I have already protected you and cared for you, keeping you from harm and waiting for you to return to me. You also know that I have an inheritance waiting for you, and that there's a big celebration up here when I wrap up things down there on earth. I want you to long for the day as much as I long to share it with you. On that day, I will wipe all tears away, all tears of those who endured so much for my sake. I will not even forget the little things you do for me. Even when you give a cup of cold water with me in mind, I will reward you. I can't wait to talk to you again and hold you close. You can reach me anytime, day or night. I will wait up, and don't worry if you fall asleep. I will tuck you in. With so much love, your Heavenly Father. P.S. I get all the letters you write me, even the ones you crumple up and throw in the garbage. So Paul wrote a letter to these people, and he really cared about them. He really loved them. And that letter is from God to each one of us, each by name. And that's a love letter from him. That letter is based upon Scripture. And he wants the letter to be opened and read and received. And he wants to hear back from us. If you will, let's pray.